Though it's not physical, it's the end. We don't talk much. It's gonna take time, I think, and I didn't expect to cry.
The world was shocked when Naomi Judd, the legendary country singer and matriarch of the Judds, passed away in 2022. But the devastating news surrounding her death reveals far more than anyone expected. As the details unfold, the heartbreaking truth about what led to her tragic end is becoming clearer. What happened behind closed doors? Stay tuned as we dive into the shocking revelations about Naomi's final days and the pain her family continues to grapple with. The devastating truth behind Naomi Judd's death. It was the kind of news that silences a room.
Judd of the Grammy-winning mother-daughter duo The Judds has died.
On April 30th, 2022, the music world paused as one devastating headline began to spread. Naomi Judd, the beloved country music icon and matriarch of the celebrated duo The Judds, had died. At 76 years old, her death was not expected. She had just appeared in public weeks earlier, and there were plans for a reunion tour. More importantly, she and her daughter Winona were just one day away from receiving one of the greatest honors in country music, a place in the Country Music Hall of Fame. The initial shock came not just from her passing, but from how and when it happened. One day before she was supposed to take the stage and be recognized for decades of musical achievement, she was gone. The contrast was painful. People across the country were preparing to celebrate her life's work, unaware that her life had just ended in the most tragic way. When the news reached the public, it came through a heartbreaking statement from her daughters, Ashley and Winona Judd. They released it jointly, writing that they had lost their mother to the disease of mental illness. Those words were carefully chosen. They didn't just say she had passed. They didn't call it a sudden loss or an unexpected illness. They named the reason directly: mental illness. It was a moment of brutal honesty, and it hit differently. In a time when many families might have kept the details private, the Judd family made the decision to be open about the pain they were experiencing. They knew that their mother's struggles weren't new, and they understood that her story reflected the reality that many others live with quietly. By saying it plainly, they started a larger conversation about mental health, one rooted in real grief and unfiltered truth. That same weekend, the Country Music Hall of Fame ceremony went on as planned. The decision to proceed wasn't taken lightly, but the Judd family made the difficult choice to attend, knowing Naomi had earned her place there. During the ceremony, Ashley Judd stood before the audience and spoke through tears. She talked about the pain of losing their mother and thanked everyone for their love and support. Winona stood beside her, visibly shaken, but determined to honor her mother's legacy. She said she would continue singing, even if her heart was broken. The room was filled with other artists and industry figures who had known Naomi personally or admired her from afar. The atmosphere was heavy. Everyone there felt the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about the induction anymore. It had become a memorial, an immediate and raw reflection of everything Naomi had been to the world and everything she had meant to her daughters. The pain of that day wasn't limited to the ceremony. It rippled through social media, television broadcasts, and news coverage. Fans posted old concert clips, remembered her interviews, and shared photos from years past. Country radio stations played her songs on repeat.
I found someone.
Across the country, people who had grown up listening to the Judds were grieving a loss that felt deeply personal. Naomi's early battles. But beyond the tributes, questions began to surface. People wanted to understand what had happened. How could someone so strong, so successful, and so loved feel so overwhelmed that ending her life became the only option she saw? Those who knew Naomi's history also knew that this wasn't the first time she had spoken openly about mental illness. She had written about it, she had talked about it in interviews, and yet, even with all the awareness, therapy, and support systems, the darkness had still returned. The timing of her death only made the loss feel more unbearable. One day before she was set to be honored publicly for her achievements. One day before she was supposed to stand beside her daughter, not just as a performer, but as a survivor. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. But for her daughters, it was more than that. It was the moment they would carry with them forever. The moment their lives changed in an irreversible way. In the days following Naomi's death, more details began to emerge. It was confirmed that she had died by self-harm. Her family continued to be honest about that fact, even as the public tried to process the reality of it. Ashley Judd later spoke out in interviews, explaining that she had been the one to discover her mother. She had gone to visit Naomi at her home in Tennessee that morning. They had spent some time together, and when Ashley stepped out for just a short while, Naomi took her own life with a firearm. Ashley described the moment in heartbreaking detail. She didn't use dramatic words. She spoke plainly, as someone who was still in the middle of her grief, still trying to understand the weight of what had just happened. She said she stayed with her mother. She called for help, and she began the process of contacting other family members to share the news. That moment was life-altering. Ashley made it clear that her mother had been suffering deeply, and that her decision came not from weakness, but from the unbearable pain she had been carrying. She said Naomi had been fighting every day, and on that particular day, the fight had become too much. The family also shared that Naomi had been receiving care from professionals in the weeks leading up to her death. She had been in close contact with doctors, therapists, and other specialists. She wasn't alone. She wasn't ignored. She was actively trying to find a way through her pain. That detail was important. It reminded everyone that even with help, even with treatment, mental illness can still take lives. The tragedy of Naomi Judd's death goes far beyond the headlines. It's a reminder of how silent mental suffering can be. From the outside, Naomi had everything: fame, success, a devoted family, fans who adored her. But inside, she had been struggling for years. Her story is not just one of music and awards. It's one of resilience, pain, and ultimately, a call to take mental health seriously, no matter who you are or how much the world thinks you're okay. Long before the spotlight and the stage, Naomi Judd was already facing battles most people never see. Born Diana Ellen Judd in Ashland, Kentucky, she grew up in a modest home. Life wasn't easy, but Naomi always seemed to carry an inner spark. That energy would later become the strength behind one of the most iconic country duos in history. But even as the world would come to know her for her voice, her style, and her fearless personality, Naomi's personal life told a different story, one of resilience shaped by pain. By the time she was a teenager, Naomi had already seen more than her fair share of heartbreak. Her brother died of Hodgkin's disease when he was only 17. The loss left a permanent mark on her, one that followed her into adulthood. She also became a mother at a very young age. She was just 18 when she gave birth to Winona. Not long after, her relationship ended, and she found herself raising her daughters, Winona and Ashley, mostly on her own. As a young single mother, Naomi worked hard to keep her family afloat. She studied nursing while taking care of her kids and working jobs that paid the bills. There was no glamour in it. There was no spotlight yet. It was just survival. But even in those tough years, music was a constant presence. Naomi and Winona sang together at home. They didn't have much, but they had each other. and they had harmony. That connection between mother and daughter would eventually lead them to Nashville. Naomi was determined. She didn't have a lot of industry contacts, and she wasn't a typical rising star. She was older than most new artists, a mom with responsibilities and a lot of hard life experience. But when she and Winona sang together, people listened. Their voices blended in a way that felt natural, like they were made to sing side by side. And that's exactly what they did. The rise of the Judds. By the early 1980s, the Judds were becoming a household name. They signed with RCA Records, and their first single quickly climbed the country charts. Their sound was different, pure, emotional, and full of stories that felt real. The fact that they were a mother-daughter team only made them more unique. Audiences connected to them instantly. It wasn't just music, it was family. Over the next decade, the Judds released multiple hit albums, earned 5 Grammy Awards, and won 9 Country Music Association awards. Their songs like Mama He's Crazy, Why Not Me, and Love Can Build a Bridge became country staples. Naomi often stood out in interviews. She was confident, outspoken, and charismatic. But even as she smiled on camera, something deeper was always there, hidden behind her eyes. In the early 1990s, Naomi was diagnosed with Hepatitis C, a life-threatening illness that forced her to retire from music. The news shocked her fans, and it shifted her focus completely. For years, she had poured everything into building their career. And now, suddenly, she had to walk away. Winona continued on as a solo artist, but for Naomi, life off stage brought a whole new set of challenges. She later revealed that the combination of illness, early trauma, and the pressure of fame had triggered a major mental health crisis. Even when her body began to heal, her mind was still hurting. She experienced long periods of depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. These struggles weren't just passing moments. They were severe and ongoing. She wrote about them in her memoirs. She spoke about them in interviews. But even then, not everyone understood how deep the pain went. There was a pressure to always be the strong one, especially for someone like Naomi, who had built a brand around perseverance and strength. But behind closed doors, she was fighting to stay afloat. Her daughters saw it. Close friends knew it. And Naomi herself never denied it. She said there were days when she couldn't get out of bed. There were moments when she questioned her own worth, even after everything she had accomplished. The public often sees fame as a shield, a kind of protection from everyday pain. But for Naomi, fame only made her feel more alone. She had fans, but she also had expectations to live up to. She had awards, but she also had memories she couldn't erase. And through all of that, she kept trying. She kept showing up. That was the most painful part, how hard she had worked to stay alive and how heavy the weight became anyway. Her relationship with her daughters, especially Winona, also faced its own set of complications. They loved each other deeply, but years of working together had created tension. Naomi had always been a strong personality, and Winona, too, had found her own voice. That led to moments of conflict and periods of distance. They went through therapy. They tried to understand each other. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But the love never went away. Ashley, on the other hand, pursued her own career in acting and advocacy. She was often the more private of the two daughters, but she remained close to her mother in her own way. When Naomi passed, Ashley was the one by her side, and in the aftermath, she became the family's voice, explaining with care and courage what had happened. Even after stepping away from music, Naomi continued to speak out about mental health. She became an advocate, hoping her honesty would help others feel less alone. She participated in campaigns, supported organizations, and spoke at events. But she also admitted that recovery wasn't linear. Some days were better, others were unbearable. That's what made her story so powerful and so heartbreaking. Her death brought all of that to light again. Suddenly, the world was looking back at Naomi's life not just as a performer, but as a woman who had tried, failed, and tried again. A woman who gave everything she had to her family, her career, and her own survival. And even in the end, when the pain overtook her, her story continued to make people listen. A sisterhood strained by silence. Since Naomi's death, Naomi Judd has been carrying a different kind of weight. The grief didn't just come from losing her mother. It came from losing her duet partner, her musical other half, and someone who had been right beside her for most of her career. But Winona didn't retreat from the spotlight. In fact, she did the opposite. She decided to go on with the Judds' reunion tour, even though her mother was no longer by her side. What was originally planned as a celebration of their legacy turned into a healing experience for both Winona and the fans. She brought in other female country artists to join her on stage, including stars like Brandi Carlile, Martina McBride, and Trisha Yearwood. Each show was filled with tributes to Naomi, with Winona often pausing between songs to talk about her mother, her grief, and the love that still lingers in every lyric. She didn't pretend to be okay. There were moments she visibly struggled on stage, but performing gave her a sense of purpose again. It reminded her of the bond she shared with Naomi, even in silence. Fans noticed. The energy was raw and unfiltered. People weren't just watching a concert. They were witnessing someone survive in real time. Winona also used the platform to speak out about mental health and grief. In interviews, she admitted that the loss triggered old habits. She said she leaned heavily on her support system, her faith, and even therapy to stay grounded. She told one outlet that some days felt impossible, but that singing was the only thing that made sense. Outside of music, Winona has also become more active on social media. She shares updates, speaks directly to fans, and posts behind-the-scenes photos. But it's not just for promotion. It's her way of staying connected to the people, to the music, and to the memory of her mom. Ashley Judd's grief took a different shape. As someone who has always been more private, she didn't immediately step back into the public eye. After the initial media wave surrounding Naomi's death, she took time away to heal. She focused on therapy, self-care, and reconnecting with what mattered most: peace, solitude, and quiet spaces. But Ashley wasn't silent for long. She started appearing at public events tied to humanitarian work and women's rights, causes she's long been passionate about. Her speeches and interviews reflected the pain she still carried. She spoke honestly about what it was like to discover her mother after her self-harm. Not to shock people, but to humanize the experience of grief and mental illness. She became even more vocal about the importance of privacy in the digital age. After details of her mother's death were leaked in the press, Ashley filed legal motions to prevent further public release of sensitive materials. She wanted to protect Naomi's dignity, even after death. That move led to broader discussions across media outlets about how the deaths of public figures are reported and how families are often re-traumatized by sensationalism. In her personal life, Ashley has stayed close to her extended family. She often visits Kentucky, where she and her mother had once shared a home. She's also leaned on her community of activists and writers, people who help her find meaning in her loss through stories and service. Ashley hasn't returned to acting full-time, though she's kept her options open. For now, she seems to be choosing roles that align with her healing process: quiet, intentional, and grounded. Winona Judd doesn't shy away from honesty, even when it hurts. In a recent interview, she opened up about the complex and often painful distance between her and her sister, Ashley Judd. What she described wasn't just about grief or family tension, it was about a silence that had grown too wide to ignore. To Winona, it doesn't feel like a physical loss. It feels like something deeper, harder to name. Something that crept in slowly, but now sits heavily between them. She admits they don't talk much anymore. The bond that once connected them, whether by blood, pain, or performance, has shifted. What's left now is a strange kind of stillness that neither of them seems ready to break. She didn't expect to feel so emotional, but she is. Being a mother now, raising teenagers, feeling that pull of love and responsibility, it hits her differently. Maybe it's because she understands now what it means to fight for a relationship. Or maybe because she knows how quickly those connections can fade when left unspoken. She says she misses her sister. Even if she can't say it out loud, the feeling is there. She imagines Ashley at home, probably wondering where Winona is or what she's doing. And though they've both gone their separate ways, Ashley with her activism and acting, Winona with her music and family, there's still that unshakable link, that knowledge that, for most of their lives, they were in this together. There's no one moment that caused the distance between them. It wasn't a single fight or disagreement. It was more like a slow unraveling, a collection of moments where things didn't get said, where pain was ignored or brushed off, where healing was put on hold because life just kept moving. Winona calls it a transition. She doesn't like the word retirement and won't use it, not when it comes to how things have changed. Instead, she describes it as a shift in how they communicate, how they show up for each other, how they deal with the weight of their family's shared past. She remembers the days when they used to talk more, before the spotlight, before the grief, before the world expected them to carry their family's legacy in very different ways. Winona stayed close to the music. Ashley moved toward a public life of advocacy and acting. And somewhere along the way, they stopped being close. It's not that the love disappeared, but the space between them grew wider. Dealing with the spotlight alone, Winona admits it hasn't been easy moving forward without the kind of connection she once had with Ashley. Their mother's death left a gap neither of them fully knows how to fill. And while Ashley grieves in her own way, quietly, privately, Winona continues to live out loud. She performs, she speaks. She works through the emotions on stage, in interviews, in music. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It means showing up even when it hurts, especially when the audience expects strength, but the heart still feels broken. She carries a kind of guilt, the guilt of surviving, of continuing to sing their mother's songs, of standing in the spotlight without Naomi or Ashley beside her. She wonders if Ashley feels the same way, if she looks at the public performances, the interviews, the tributes, and feels distant from it all. The truth is, they've both chosen different paths through the pain, and neither path is wrong, but they haven't quite figured out how to walk side by side anymore. There are a lot of things Winona wishes she could say, not just about their mother, but to her sister directly. She doesn't text Ashley as often as she used to. Maybe it's because she doesn't know what to say. Or maybe it's because she's afraid of what might not be said back. She imagines Ashley feeling the same, sitting with her own questions, her own silence. They both lost the same mother, but they lost her in very different ways. And maybe that's where the disconnect begins. Winona reflects on how much her family has endured. The fame, the trauma, the expectations, all of it stacked on top of personal pain that never had time to heal properly. She believes this is about identity, about roles they were forced into, about wounds that never got to close. Even in moments of clarity, there are no easy answers. Just the ongoing ache of wondering if things could be different. At first glance, the Judd family appears united. They all live on the same piece of land, a large farm in rural Tennessee. But the reality is far more complicated. Though the houses sit close together, the relationships do not. Winona and her sister Ashley may live on the same property, but they hardly see each other. Sometimes they don't see each other at all. Winona doesn't shy away from the truth. She admits it's unusual, but she also knows that many families have their own complications, and this is simply theirs. Winona explains that she and Ashley have little in common, apart from the fact that they share the same mother and a missing father. Their paths diverged early. At 18, Winona left home to pursue a music career. Ashley was just 14. By that age, Winona believes Ashley had already separated herself emotionally from the family, out of necessity. Winona says she ended up raising Ashley, taking on a role she wasn't prepared for. Ashley would refer to her as Sister Mommy, a label Winona struggled with. She didn't want to be Ashley's mother. She wanted to be her sister. But the circumstances of their lives didn't leave much choice. Once Winona became famous, she was often absent. She missed the big moments in Ashley's life, like prom. Their bond never developed in the way most siblings hope for. Over the years, their relationship took the shape of a distant marriage. Two people growing in opposite directions. They both kept moving, and the emotional distance continued to grow. Touring with her mother for over 30 years required Winona's full attention. It became a job that consumed her. Looking back, she realizes that her time and energy were directed toward her mother, and Ashley became the one left out. She admits this with difficulty. In some ways, she feels like she had to choose between her mother and her sister. And in the chaos of life, she chose her mother. Not out of preference, but because the demands were constant and immediate. At the time, Winona said she was always reacting, never planning ahead. Now that she's older, the weight of that lost time is clearer. She's aware of how much they've missed. There is sorrow for the years that passed without connection. Winona built a life as a mother. Ashley built a different one as a single woman who travels the world. Their lives don't align anymore. Texts come from faraway places, and Winona stays grounded in her home life. They move in different circles, even though they started from the same place. Winona acknowledges that they are not close, but she also points out that few sister relationships are perfect. She doesn't deny the dysfunction, she names it. And she understands how those early roles they were forced into shaped their dynamic. Winona also reveals another truth that shaped her life. She didn't know who her real father was until she turned 30. The man she believed to be her father wasn't. Learning that changed her. It added to the sense of confusion and loss that had been quietly present for years. Still, she says she has chosen to be open about it. The honesty has helped her come to terms with the life she's lived, one marked by both hardship and growth. A marriage that changed overnight. Amid all of this, Winona found love. She got married. She describes that time as joyful. Her clothes were organized, her health was in check, and her future looked promising. She had known her husband since she was 20. They shared the stage as bandmates and shared a deep trust as partners. It felt like something lasting, something safe. But everything changed quickly. Almost overnight, her world shifted from celebration to crisis. The man she loved needed urgent medical care. The honeymoon never happened. Instead of traveling or settling into newlywed life, they moved into hospitals. Then, into a home adapted for physical challenges. It was not what she imagined for the first year of marriage. She says, "No one expects to begin married life this way." While others enjoy the simple joys of starting fresh together, she found herself praying for strength and clarity. She had always imagined growing old together, facing these kinds of challenges at 80, maybe 90. Not now, but life had a different plan. One day she found herself in the shower, holding up her husband because he could no longer stand on his own. He had lost all function in his left side, his leg, his hand, his strength, and she stood there, supporting him with everything she had, while silently thinking, "This isn't how it was supposed to go." They had just launched a tour. Their band was thriving. Their lives were full of music, movement, and momentum. But in a matter of seconds, everything changed. There was no time to process it all, no pause button, just a shift into survival mode. Winona didn't stop to complain. That simply wasn't how she was raised. Her mother had taught her early on, you get up, you move forward, and you don't stay down. She remembers the lessons clearly. If they didn't work the garden, they didn't eat. There was no luxury of sitting still or wallowing. It wasn't about being inspirational or strong for the cameras. It was about necessity. She didn't rely on any grand sense of purpose or try to turn the struggle into a song. She says there was no anthem of hope playing in the background. Instead, it was just her, pleading with God, asking for enough grace to get through the day. She didn't feel heroic. She felt human. The odds weren't in their favor. Her husband was told he would never play music again. But Winona refused to believe it. She says she was angry enough to challenge whatever force had come for them, determined to prove it had picked the wrong woman on the wrong day. And somehow, they pushed through. Today, she says things are better. Actually, better than good. It's strange, but she no longer notices the missing leg. When she looks at him now, she just sees a man who doesn't stop. He's back on the ski slopes, moving through Telluride's snow-covered mountains like he's never known pain. It may take him longer, but he never says, "I can't." He just figures out how. Still, she admires him. Somehow, in the middle of loss, pain, and rebuilding, he has become a steady force. And while she carries the weight of what they've been through, she also sees the quiet beauty in how far they've come. Naomi Judd's passing left a hole in the hearts of fans and her family alike. And the heartbreaking details surrounding her death remind us that even the strongest people face unimaginable struggles. With the recent distance between her daughters, do you think Winona will be able to bridge the gap and mend the rift with Ashley? What are your thoughts on the tragic details surrounding Naomi's passing? Let us know in the comments below. We always love hearing from you.